The unrelenting and frankly unhinged coverage of actor Sushant Singh Rajput's death went on for days, weeks, and months. But there were very many more stories that deserved way more attention. What were they? That's the focus on Media Buddhi today. Hi, I'm R Venkatesh. Now, the title of this video is called 5 of the Best Reporting of 2020. But what do I mean by best? Do I mean best investigative reporting, best explanatory journalism, best analysis? Well, it's a little difficult to pick it out because it's quite subjective, and to be honest, there were thousands of great reports throughout the year. So, how did I bring this list down to just 5? First, I should say this is a personal and subjective list. Although I read thousands of news reports this year, I couldn't have done justice to a majority of the excellent ones. Also, because of COVID-19, I lost several months with newspapers. And speaking of newspapers, I should say that great reporting sometimes they get lost in newspapers, even in front page stories, because there are so many news reports to choose from. Sometimes great reporting is lost in the profession. Even journalists don't know which the great stories were, and sometimes even within the same newspaper or organization. Second, I did ask a half a dozen journalists and editors, and I also got some responses on Twitter. So it's not like I don't have a sample size, but I feel that's really okay because my effort here is just to show a slice, not really claim this to be a scientific survey or anything like that. Third, I decided to focus on a series of reportage rather than a single story. However, when I did pick a single story, I made sure that it was a deep dive running into several thousand words. And fourth, I decided I will limit this list to only 2 kinds of reporting. 1, reporting that focuses on the institutions of democracy, and 2, reporting that focuses on the underrepresented. So, for example, I would not have chosen any reporting related to the Bihar election. Rather, I would have focused on any reporting that looks at the electoral process. And finally, I did not pick any reporting that praised the current government. Why do I say that? Because it's pretty easy to do, praising the government, that is. There are no obstacles in the way, and there are many news organizations that do it on a minute-by-minute basis. And finally, I should say that a journalist's job really is to ask tough questions. It's quite literally the job description of being a journalist. Also, I should say I did not pick any reporting from the organization I work for, Boom, and its sister organization, India Spend. But I would be remiss if I say, do not go and check this out. You should. Boomlive.in is the website where we do a lot of fact-checking and media literacy, and indiaspend.com is all about data journalism. One final thing to say, I use the word story a lot when I actually should say news report or reporting or journalism. That's because we in the business, we use the word story a lot. But by story, I do not mean fiction, I mean non-fiction, I mean journalism. With that said, let's begin. I'm going to count down from 5 to 1, but really these stories could have been in any order. Number 5, the COVID-19 pandemic. Now I'm cheating up a little bit here and picking 2 series, and you'll see why in a moment. This was a great opportunity for TV networks to highlight the sheer desperation that was brought about by the lockdown, and many TV networks, to be honest, did a great job. Several TV networks were criminally negligent as well, but nothing really was better than Ravish Kumar's coverage of the plight of the migrant worker and the poor, the hungry and the homeless during the lockdown. The NDTV India anchor should be seen as a national treasure, and as always his coverage was absolutely humane, curious and empathetic. The other series was Rukmini S's podcast, The Moving Curve, running into more than 100 episodes now. In these episodes, Rukmini S, a data journalist based in Chennai, looked at possibly pretty much all the hard numbers, impossible questions, intriguing trends, and always with an empathetic ear. For those who want to know more, I would recommend starting with episode 100. It's titled Those We Lost. Number 4, there was plenty of great reporting by independent digital publishers and really difficult to pick anything, but I'm going to go with Scroll.in's coverage. Now, Executive Editor Supriya Sharma did a great deal of reporting on the human cost of the lockdown, and she went to the Prime Minister's constituency, Varanasi, to report on how people went hungry there during the lockdown. For her efforts, there was an FIR lodged against her. But really, for this video, I'm going to go with a different set of reporting done by Scroll.in. It was called a silent crackdown, and it was on people the government went after for protesting during the CAA protests earlier in the year, and it also sought to criminalize those who were victims during the Delhi violence. This reporting was led by Arunabh Saikia and Vijayta Lalwani. Number 3, the Caravan magazine. The September issue on the Delhi violence was a great example of solid reporting, but I'm going to go with 2 other issues of the magazine, February 2020 and October 2020. Both directly and indirectly looked at how the judiciary functions and how it is compromised. The first was a cover story, a profile of Ranjan Gogoi, the former Chief Justice of India and currently a MP in the Rajya Sabha. This story, it was done by Arshu John, and it focuses on Ranjan Gogoi and the decisions he took as Chief Justice of India and goes into his backstory as well. Now, the second report that I want to focus on was the October 2020 cover story on Tushar Mehta, the Solicitor General of India. This report by Atul Dev is about how the government is increasingly exerting its influence over the judiciary. And when you read both the issues in conjunction, you realize that the judiciary has radically changed in the last few years. Number 2, much like the death of actor Sushant Singh Rajput, there was another story that grabbed a lot of the headlines. This was the rape and murder of the 19-year-old woman from Hathras. Now, people might be tempted into saying both of them were individuals. What is the difference between the 2 cases? Now, that really is a great question. On the one hand, Sushant Singh Rajput, clearly a tragic case. We're talking about suicide here, but even if you want to question that, what else could we have done? Sushant Singh Rajput, after all, was a prominent member of Bollywood. He had a lot of agency. On the other hand, you have a 19-year-old woman. She's raped and mutilated by several men, and then several days later she dies. Her body is not given over to her family. Her cremation is done in secrecy. Also, this is a woman in rural India. She was a Dalit. So this is a story about gender violence as well as caste violence. Now, there was plenty of reporting on this story across media, TV networks, websites, newspapers, and so on. But for this list, I'm choosing the October 19th cover story of Outlook magazine. It's called She the Dalit, and it has several stories written by women, and several of them are Dalit women. Now, I should admit here that after Vinod Mehta, the former and late editor-in-chief, passed away, I stopped reading Outlook magazine regularly, but this was a stunning issue. For once, it allowed those who were most affected by the violence set the agenda for coverage. And number 1, 2 new initiatives gathered steam this year. The first was Article 14, started by Samar Halankar and Priya Ramani and several others. It is a website that deals with issues of judiciary and democracy and contains a lot of great reporting. The second was reporting done by a bunch of reporters who call themselves the Reporters Collective. This is led by Nitin Sethi and Kumar Sambhav Srivastav. Some of the reporting they did was published on Article 14, but a lot of it was published elsewhere as well. They did a series of investigations on the state of surveillance in India, but the series I'm picking for this video is the reporting they did on electoral bonds, which basically allows any political party to collect money without revealing where the money came from. Now, the Reporters Collective looks at some of the toughest stories to crack, but the reason I picked them was not just the courageous reporting they did, but also for the uniqueness of their model. They spread their risk around by publishing with several collaborative partners. For example, the electoral bonds investigation was published in English on HuffPo India, but HuffPo folded up and the archive is also gone with it. It's partly because of a new law of the government curbing FDI, but the stories actually continue to live on. So it is for this unique collaboration and the fact that these stories are available not just in multiple mediums and multiple websites, but also multiple geographies in India and multiple languages. So there you have it, 5 examples or more of some of the best reporting done in India in 2020. Of course, I missed out on hundreds of deserving candidates, especially in languages other than English, and also reporting that is not Delhi-centric. But as I said in the beginning, this is just a slice. What stories should I have absolutely included on this list but did not? Write into us on any platform, we'll have a conversation. And thanks for watching.